the responsibilities of the board under the Federal Workforce Investment Act and under the State Act. And there are a list of responsibilities, but also because citizen participation, that's a long word, in government has always been an interest of mine. You know, that's something that I studied in college and had an interest in. And I've learned a lot from this board in terms of participation, what you can expect from board members. The nice thing about this board is that everyone brings a lot of expertise. You know, we're people who have an expertise in workforce investment, in workforce issues, and we all bring that to the table. And that is what the Workforce Investment Act is about. Essentially, it's three things. It's input, advice, and collaboration. And, you know, we've seen a lot of examples of those, but particularly here, it is, again, according to the code section, the Workforce Investment Act says that this board shall advise the governor and assist the governor with regard to a workforce investment plan for the future, which this board does. Number two, in conjunction with that, is a workforce investment report on the activities for the previous year, which this board considered today and will consider again on Monday. And this board will assist the governor in evaluating and continuous improvement of the Regional Workforce Investment Board programs and services. And so that is why we have a number of programs that we highlight each session that apply to the state. The other part of that, and the big part of Workforce Investment Act at the federal level, was to end the silos. Because workforce investment programs, to bring workforce development to the people, you have to bring together workforce development, our agency. You have to bring forth the Department of Education for the training. You have to bring in the community colleges, and you've got to bring in economic development. Because those are all the partners. So it was to end, to provide a seamless single service delivery system that would provide workforce development training and retraining programs in a seamless environment, so that someone wouldn't have to go for an apprenticeship program to the federal government, go to the Department of Education for original training, the community colleges for retraining and those programs, but that there would be a collaboration. And so obviously, I mean, I think it's fair to say, I think board members here have seen examples where that kind of input has been involved. Certainly that's today with career path apprenticeship type program. I mean, I can think of other examples. Career paths, when we did that software, there was a lot of input and advice on those programs. Collaboration is what this is about, and that's Steve Oval and the community colleges. We work linkages, so we work closely with them. We don't duplicate services. We provide a cohesive system of services for folks. Economic development, with Deb joining in our board, is an important element as far as being able to market those opportunities that this state has for outside employers for new employment and employment opportunities. The education system, Department of Education with Roger, because that's what's involved in training, in high school development, in career development, in all of those programs that make people ready, young people ready for the workplace. So that's what's involved in input to the department and therefore the governor, advice to our agency, but it's also evaluation of the local regional workforce investment. How are those programs doing? Are they meeting the needs of people in their regions? Are they efficiently spending the money provided? Are those programs the best programs? Collaboration, as I said, the examples are always here. So those are the roles, and I hope that each of you can see examples where that's happened. Input, advice, collaboration. I hope that everyone on the board is comfortable with that role. Yeah, are we comfortable with that role and what we're doing? Anybody? Okay. Then number two, I think we need to know too, and we need to make sure as far as input from you, are there programs that you would like to see highlighted? An area where you have a special interest? Is there, in terms of continuous improvement of our regional workforce investment boards, are there some things that the department can provide to you or provide a little better that we're not doing now?
I have a question.
Where?
Obviously, there's a program I want to see highlighted, but how does the state board go about doing that when really, isn't it the regional workforce boards have the money? I mean, what would we do as a state board?
The state board, under the code sections, provides a guidance to assist the governor. They provide guidance to the regional boards in terms of highlighting those programs, in terms of suggestions, and in terms of evaluation. So they would provide that guidance to the board by perhaps highlighting a program that they thought deserved emphasis and working with the department to provide that worthwhile program with a profile and what we can from Wagner-Pizer funds from our end, and also to work with the regional boards to kind of influence them to participate, perhaps with a program that someone hasn't done yet or hasn't thought of, something that would be good.
This is where it would go out, I would presume, through Carol to the regional offices to say the board talked about this and we would be interested in more apprenticeships, and if they say on their board, hey, I don't know anything about it, then we have to put together the program that says, here it is. This is how we have I'm trying to say it correctly now, not job training, but training for jobs. Training for jobs.
Registered apprenticeship.
Right, and this board can bring that up as part of the evaluation part of it, through Carol and through those programs, or directly to the regional workforce board saying, we feel this is a worthwhile program, there's not enough emphasis here, we see 6 regions aren't really utilizing it, we think they should.
I have a question. Okay, so I'm the regional chair in my region.
Okay.
We are just approving our plan.
Right.
So we're a little late in that process.
For this year, absolutely.
Well, it's going to cover how many years? Our new plan that we're just adopting right now.
Is 2, right?
No, just now it's just are you talking about WIA?
Yeah.
It's just a 1-year extension.
So we're just doing the plan.
Authorization. That's
Right.
right.
We're doing the plan for the 1-year extension.
Typically, those under the law are designed to be 5-year strategic plans, but because they promised reauthorization and they didn't do it, they then initially went to 2-year plans, and now they're just asking us to do it a year at a time because we're all still waiting with maybe something different.
Right. But the regional boards, our regional board has just gone through the process.
Correct.
So I'm saying we're a little late if we're going to influence our board because we've just gone through the process.
Unless we take it back in an educational mode, I would say, and then ask the region, do you want to amend your plan?
Right, because you can modify your customer service plan at any point in time.
I have a question. But the RWIP plans should be based on the state plan, correct? I mean,
Yes,
okay. Yes, no, no?
yes, some of the information in it, yes.
Okay, so the
But
state,
there's also the local piece that's
Right.
very local. They get to decide, there's some state objectives that they need to address and meet, but then they can put all kinds of other things in there too.
okay,
So,
for example, Job Corps is in the state plan. The RWIPs can say, I don't have nothing to do with Job Corps, even though it's in the state plan.
well, they don't have, not every region has it. It says
We don't
some
have
Job
it.
Corps. But I don't know of any region that has not made referrals to Job Corps
Right.
that was appropriate.
Okay.
So,
Right, this board
don't
would
have that
have,
precedence.
this board would have input into those state goals and that state plan, which
the
we
Job Corps
approve
is a
here.
required partner.
So they could determine those state priorities that the locals are encouraged to follow. They don't necessarily have to. Workforce Investment Act is based upon local people knowing best what their area
Right.
needs. So they are given some autonomy in doing that.
Right.
But there's still guidance from the state plan and from this state board, especially in terms of new and innovative ideas and programs and what ought to be emphasized and what's missing, what's lacking.
Go ahead, Jean.
I think Ken had one here at first, Dee.
Oh, okay.
Since we have new board members, it might be helpful if you, I thought maybe today you would provide where we would find references to advisory boards in the state code, and maybe specifically our board and its role in both the real language and the state code.
Right, as a matter of fact, and I just talked to Diane, normally we have new board members participating in boards and commissions training, but apparently for some reason they didn't contact us. I know that training, I think that training is going on Monday. Usually you would get to go to that training, so we'll see what we can do about the training. In terms of your inquiry, on the state level, it's 84A.1B. And in the Workforce Investment Act, it's Title I, Section 111. Title I, Section 111.
You can also go to Google, and if you just Google the role of the state board under the Workforce Investment Act, it'll bring all that up for you.
Okay.
So I would hope, I thought, Diane, did we do some training for new board members
We
too?
have an orientation, they get a board packet, and it talks about the role of the state board, both federal and state outline.
But there is some state training, so maybe we could see about that too, because I know they're doing that training these days, so.
I do remember coming, when I
Yes.
the first time I was on the board,
Mhm.
we had all the people, new board people in Des Moines
And
for
then the governor's
all day
office
session.
sponsored it, and besides that, they also talk about the ethics of board members, about liability, about how to work with the media. It was an all-day session for all boards and commissions appointed by the governor, as, for new members as an orientation. But as far as I know, the last one was 2008. And I don't think any of you have been contacted as new board members, have you?
Well, we can ask, let's ask the question.
Mhm.
We'll go back and ask the question about training for new board members and see what happens.
I have the handouts from 2008, so if anyone's interested, you know, I'd be happy to share those.
Well, I think Ken has a burning question.
Burning. I did have a question, so I was trying to get my head around, we have input into what the state board's priorities are, and we can fill in blanks for areas that we see lacking, and this board doesn't have the right to say mandate or which to do certain things.
The best you could do is recommend through that process and through the funding mechanisms back, but the whole workforce investment program is based upon the local area knows best what the local area needs in terms of workforce more in terms of example evaluation, showing they're deficient in this area or that area, and what the state goals are or the state plan. Yeah.
Well, as you research, I did a little of that research. Keep in mind that the makeup of this board was grandfathered in the previous definition in 1990 or whenever that was. Workforce makeup was redefined, but Iowa chose to keep the same configuration. So as you look at that, our board configuration doesn't line up with the newest suggestions from the Workforce Investment Act. It was grandfathered in. So that's why this makeup is what it is, not necessarily what you might read in the more current workforce information.
Exactly, and that's a good point. We were grandfathered in because we had our version prior to the federal law. In fact, we were the innovators of it. Our director went to Washington, and basically a lot of it's based on our law and what we did. But it is different. The makeup does not qualify under the current law. Some of those things do not qualify, but we're grandfathered in. That's one of the things in Washington is a proposal not to allow grandfathering. So if they ever pass an extension of the Workforce Investment Act, then that may change things.
Yeah, the reference was what Ken was saying, that we can't mandate or dictate to the regional workforce investment boards. But you said that you could through the appropriations that you get them?
Well, in terms of the funding mechanism we have in those programs, the department could encourage. It's more of evaluation and continuous improvement. The theory is suggested improvements. We can't force them to do anything.
But that's because that's how we adopted in Iowa?
That's because that's what the federal law is. That's the model.
Because I have it says here, it says modify the WIA state plan to ensure at least 5% of local formula funds go to support registered recruitment and training, apprenticeship recruitment and training. So is that?
But I think that's 5%. That's the 5% out of the 15% discretionary. We're giving, we have a 15% that goes to the governor. That's discretionary money.
Okay.
This past, the administration took that away and left the 5%, specified what happens to that. Rather, in the extension, what will happen to that, I don't know. We and a lot of other states have said, hey, look, this ought to be provided to the states. They ought to have how to spend it. That's the 5%. That's not the regional allocation.
Okay.
And I don't really.
You're right. The regional allocation is based on a formula that takes in local demographics, unemployment rates, poverty rates, all kinds of different things depending on which program it is, adult, dislocated worker, or youth. And so it's separate.
Oh, no, and that's fine. I just wanted to clarify that for the formula funds, what it says, and for, what DOL is, suggesting, opposed to what's allowed if it was an Iowa thing or where those funds were coming from. Okay, and that makes sense.
Joe, the early years of this board, prior to the enactment of the Workforce Investment Act, this board spent a lot of time and energy in terms of looking at a long-term strategic plan for workforce development in the state of Iowa. And I presume now that pretty much we're following the Federal Workforce Investment Act guidelines with respect to strategic planning, so that the annual report that you'll take action on next Monday is in fact the state strategic plan as far as workforce development is concerned, as it relates to the requirement of the Iowa statute as opposed to the workforce.
No. The report that you're going to vote on Monday is strictly for the Workforce Investment Act dollars only. The purpose of and I think that's where the confusion comes for some folks, and I know it does for the local boards. They think they're a WIA board. It is the WIA law that established the board for the workforce issues in the state and in the region. It is not a WIA board. So what you're going to vote on or approve next Monday, hopefully, is just simply how the WIA funds were expended across the state. That's all.
So how does that relate to our need to do any kind of meaningful strategic planning as far as workforce development in the state of Iowa is concerned.
So that legislation gives you the opportunity to do that strategic planning for workforce issues, and Wagner-Pfizer and WIA, they're just a part of that.
Well, and what we've done is we've wrapped it up into the plan for the coming year in terms of what our priorities would be. But you're right, Steve, and you know.
That's a year-to-year.
Right, because
activity,
you know, and
as
what
far
you-
as a longer horizon looking.
Right, and that's what you're talking about is the original and the legislation says that we should adopt a 20-year plan. This board has not adopted a 20-year plan nor directed development of it. I suspect because nobody thinks it's very realistic, but that's that sort of long-term vision thing that we ought to have. So I don't know how you want to fit that in terms of, you know, what are the strategic goals? Right now, we're operating on the year with WIA extensions. What are our strategic goals? What do we want to emphasize in terms of workforce investment programs? Not only WIA, but the Wagner-Pfizer money, all of the rest of it, education. Where is our emphasis and what are we trying to do? And yeah, we spent time originally on a 5-year plan, and that's not really, I don't, you know, was very productive in terms of long-range planning, but that's strategically, how far do you want to go and what do you want to emphasize for the next year strategically in terms of goals?
Well, I think that's, you know, leads to that point. You know, as a board, at least in recent years, we really haven't spent a lot of time, you know, looking at any kind of time frame outside of the next year. You know, and I personally believe there's some value in doing that. I think given the economic circumstances that every state agency, you know, has been struggling with, you know, the best you can do is just to keep your nose above water. And I think with the commitment for integration, which was in fact, you know, a long-term deployment process and vision, an enormous amount of time and energy devoted to that, which has been extraordinarily productive. But I guess I would just put that out there. At some point, as we move along with this continuum, there might be some value in taking a little bit longer term look, whether that's 2 years or 3 years. I certainly agree. You know, even 5-year time frames anymore are hard to deal with, just given the dynamic nature of our economy and everything else. But we continue to have, you know, a lot of interconnectivity between the Department of Education, the Department of Economic Development, and Iowa Workforce Development, that where there continue to be a lot of overlaps. And even though we talk about those, you know, at meetings from time to time, and I know the agency directors are working very collaboratively to look at ensuring that there isn't duplication or that we get the right synergy out of all of that. But, you know, it's a state board devoted to focusing on developing the state's workforce resources. I think there might be some value going forward to have a little bit longer time frame that we at least have an opportunity to discuss.
I would add, I agree with integration. To me was one of those. The other one is technology. We spent a lot of time over the talking about technology resources. We need to see some of that implemented. Third one, the one we brought up today, I think there's great opportunity, and that's digital divide. I think this group could be very thoughtful about how we start bridging that gap. There's certainly a lot of discomfort and disagreement a little bit today on that issue, but boy, that's one that I think we could be very creative in working on. So I think there are opportunities for that kind of thinking. I agree with you, Steve.
Carol,
And I
correct me if
personally
I'm...
think it would be awesome if this board developed a 5-year plan that we could just present to Department of Labor, and they said, oh, we only want 1 year, and that's like, you know what, we're just gonna go on without you and not wait for you to do whatever it is that you are trying to do or not do. So it doesn't, just because the Department of Labor can't get moved off center or Congress can, I don't think that that means that you cannot.
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, I think a lot of this is tied together anyway in my mind. Iowa was in a leadership role in the establishment of a workforce program, you know, more than a decade ago. In fact, much of what the nation's laws are set up or modeled after what we did. And I remember some point in time when I was early on, and Sally left around here, we did spend time talking about that planning stuff, which gives us, I believe, the opportunity to be more proactive in terms of having some control over what's coming down the road than being reactive as we have been over the past 3 or 4 years because of the economic downturn. And frankly, the gridlock in Washington is causing us, collectively a lot of problems. I see great value in sitting down and saying, okay, regardless of what the folks in Washington do or don't do, we have a vision for where this state needs to go, what opportunities we see coming down the highway, and maybe my crystal ball's no better than anybody else's, but collectively there's a lot of wisdom and experience and expertise in this room. I think coupled with some of the other divisions that Norma Schmoker, who was on here, and I worked for years trying to get the Department of Education involved, years trying to get economic development involved, and with varying levels of success. But I don't think we can sit back and wait for leadership from Washington. Sorry, but I'm not sure it's there. But I think the leadership that we have to utilize is leadership in this room and in this state. Try to see where it is we're going to go, what it is we think are viable programs, and what resources can we collectively bring to the table to make this state prosper. It's good news, bad news thing that the director talked about earlier is good news is we're only 6.1 in terms of unemployment. That's like being on the front end of a ship sinking backwards. Good news is I'm not in the water yet. However, we know what's coming here. So I think we need to return to our roots, so to speak, and assume a leadership role and start. I want to drive the bus. I don't want to be on the back of the bus going over the cliff. Okay? I think we can do that if we sit down and collectively put our thoughts together and try to develop some kind of a program, regardless of what the feds are going to do, and try to put together a plan and then advocate that collectively, not just with the department sending letters, but many of us on this board have contacts with the folks in DC. So ask us to help. That's why we're here. That's why we're on the board. We have differences politically, okay, but I think most of us serve on this board because we want to help the working people of Iowa, both employers and workers. And that's not going to happen unless we work together.
I agree with you, Ken. I'm just one of those that was there, appointed to the Governor Branstad's workforce prior to the WIA Act and so forth. But I did it on the regional level. And as I recall, we did assessment for the region. And then we were looking at opportunities for growth. And it was before we got a lot of grants. The only grant money that was available was from the state. And when I talk to my Region 10 folks every now and then, they tell me the grants that they have applied for, but they're federal grants because the last couple of years, instead of having the 15% discretionary at the state, we're only getting 5% discretionary from the state. And that was where the local regional plans, they had their own 5-year plans because they had done their assessment. They knew what they needed in their region, and then they would apply to the state for some of those funds to carry it out. So we're in a different world now of 5% and looking at what the state can and can't provide us of state monies versus federal monies if the Fed's money isn't going to come down. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, cart, horse, horse, cart, because our regions still know what they need and what they want to put into their plan and move it along. But they need some dollars to do some of that. So if the dollars are going to be limited, then I'm looking at, okay, what can this board do in moving our state forward with limited dollars, and then let the people in the various regions who want to push that one on through with assistance from the state. That may be the only way we can do it right now.
Well, maybe maybe one of those things could be to review all those regional plans. And if there are limited dollars, then maybe this board would recommend 4, based on whatever criteria. And then we would all work really hard to make sure that those things get funded. It does seem to me that we used to play a much more active role in trying to talk to legislators about the value of the services and new initiatives and about what makes sense in terms of rule changes, and it seems like we're doing that less. But I think that that's a good role for the board to play. And I don't really want to get involved in saying, well, let's pick only projects from Western Iowa, only picking projects from here and there, but I think we may realistically need to do some of that based on what the picture looks like and where employment is happening and which regions seem to be having the best plans to draw new employers in and new business in and to employ people. I mean, it could be a whole new way to look at the board, really, and what our role is. But again, that goes back to strategic planning.
Right, and that's, I might add, one of the things that's, I think in the packet, Diane, we added, you have available strategic planning. I think it's the information they give to the boards and commissions with the training they're going to do Monday, but it talks about, how to strategically plan, how to prioritize your goals, what things to emphasize, and that sort of thing, based on the goals and objectives of the state agency, which of course are the governor's goals, are to create jobs and to expand opportunities for new employers and new employment. So that may be something you could use. Perhaps you want to think about a strategic planning session in terms of what you want to emphasize and reviewing those regional workforce boards.
Well, so that's what I was going to ask, and I probably will sound naive on all of this, how these boards work, but in addition to what the federal is saying, that how the boards are composed and everything like that, we have 13 regional boards, 14 regional boards. How do those boards then tie into what the local government's goals and objectives are? And who knows that? I don't know what Region 15's our plan looks like, or Region 9, or Region 8.
Well, you're supposed to be included as a service provider in that plan for Region 11, but you're statewide, so that would not be. The elected officials are supposed to be tied in because they're members on the board. They're provided for in terms of the regional workforce boards. It provides for contingency of elected officials, of business, of service providers, and labor representatives. So they're included within that local board are all the decision makers so that they can set priorities for that community as to what they need to do for workforce investment programs.
For that community, but what about, I'm asking this as a state member, and I'm very concerned, I know community, rolls into the state, but as a state member, I want to know, as far as the entire state, are we tying any of this together to, for example, the goals of the governor, as you just mentioned?
Right, the statute provides for that. The statute creating this board says the board will develop workforce investment priorities to meet the goals and objectives of the state of Iowa.
Okay.
So we're supposed to implement Workforce Investment Act to operationalize the goals of this state, the state of Iowa. So we operationalize the governor's goals within the framework of Workforce Investment Act and the goals of Workforce Investment Act by the priorities and the strategic planning that they do.
And again, and I'm not being confrontational,
That's okay.
I really don't, I'm not understanding it. When you say we, do you mean the RWIPs? Because I don't see we as the state board, and I realize I've only been on the board.
Right, it's supposed to come
I'm not
out.
seeing the state board do that.
Right, it's out of this, well, we have, but it may not be pronounced quite that way. I mean, when we bring programs to you, they are operationalizing workforce development's objectives and goals. And perhaps it's not stated that way, those goals reflect, of course, the governor's goals and the overall goals. I mean, that is, there are overall goals that are supposed to be operationalized by the policies of this board to operationalize them, which are then supposed to be acted upon where the rubber meets the road by the RWIPs.
So I'll give you an example. All of the heads of the agencies are headed into a strategic planning session in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
So that would be our first one where we meet as a group to understand the long-term plan that the governor has. And we have some general things about that, but we haven't had that meeting yet. I think it's October 10th. But towards that end, we have been asked over the last 2 months or so to look at the governor's 4 objectives and to create or to give him metrics for our agency that match up with his goals and objectives. So that would be our way of operationalizing the objectives that the governor has set forth, at least for the next 4 years anyway. So we as a team have sat down and developed 5 new metrics that involve various bureaus in our daily operations of, we had a long conversation about how do we forward the goal of raising incomes of Iowa families 25%, or what is the metric we have for becoming the best educational state in the union. And we talked a lot about, interestingly enough, digital divides is one of them that we're measuring ourselves on. We came up with 5 metrics, and I can certainly share those with you. We just did this, and the metrics are new, so we don't have a lot of history, but where we do have history, we provided some. And every month, on the 5th work day, I believe, of the month, we get our 5 metrics. And of course, then what that does is that goes a step further, because then each one of the bureaus have measurements to get to those 5 metrics. So that's the total end-to-end operationalizing of the 4-year goals that the governor has strategically for the state of Iowa. So the things that we bring you, like today, are usually segments of what we're doing operationally to get to those 4 objectives that he has long-term. But I think one thing that would be helpful is I can certainly share with you those metrics that we've developed and kind of where we've been and what those measurements are. They're kind of new for people, but that's what makes them kind of energizing, because it's a new way to look at the business. And then after we have this October 10th opportunity, I can certainly share with the board, would be happy to share with the board whatever I learn about how all the agencies are working together to the 4-year objectives of the governor. But I think I think this discussion is very good, and I think we should have this discussion maybe in each one of our board meetings, because we always slice off a piece of the long-term plan. But for thinking about it, you can think about the governor's 4 objectives. That's certainly our long-term plan. And we will send out what we have from the governor's office in that regard, but then each month I can kind of give you an update on where we're at and where the metrics are for this agency. I'd be happy to share those. And then each time we meet as a board, perhaps we can slice off a topic within that strategic plan to make sure you're informed about, and also to have you folks take some time out where all we do is listen and you talk strategically about what is happening or what isn't happening, or what should we be emphasizing more, whether it be in Washington or within the state of Iowa, so that we can be together as a group. And as Ken says, each one of you know different constituents through all this, and we should be working together as a whole for our top 3 or so
not that the magic number is 3, but, you know, you kind of get to the vital few that you really want to start working on legislatively, either from a state perspective or federal perspective. That I think we could all coalesce on, regardless of where we come from, because I think that's what we're here for at the end of the day.
Well, I think,
How do these goals and objectives that we're including in our packet tie into that? I mean, does this directly flow in?
From what?
Yeah, they are the goals and objectives.
the overture by the vision and the mission statements.
Yes, exactly.
This way.
You can look at each, you can look at each borough and you can find embedded in there the goals and objectives that the governor has and how each borough intends to work towards those as their mission statement.
The 4 objectives: create
Yep.
200,000 new jobs,
Yep.
reduce the size of government by 15%, realize a 25% increase in family income, and develop the best schools in the nation. Okay, if we've already got that message, then I think our board discussion needs to be, how do we fit into this and what can we specifically do? I don't think we need to wait for more stuff out of the state. We're to advise the governor, so we need to be sending it back to the governor. Am I wrong? Am I right? What?
Well, some of us at this table are not in complete agreement with the 4 strategies set out.
Well, that's possible too.
Especially when you're a government employee, and you're going to cut government employees by 15%. On my organization as representing this table, I'm not in agreement with that at all. Period. This is not, I mean, if we're not, I'm not even going to be open to discussion on that. It's, as far as I'm concerned, that's closed. But, I mean, that's still something that's here. It's still something that's in front of us, regardless of if I agree or don't agree, and there's been a lot of that. I guess when I remember this phone call, and I remember Representative Jacoby bringing this up, I thought that this issue was to pass to what, not being just a sounding board, and I appreciate the strategic planning for especially 5 years out. We wait for DC, like Brother Sager said, if we wait for them, we wait till the tree falls down and grows moss. I mean, we need to, if we're going to look at a plan, let's look at a plan. But when we start talking about, you know, I think I mentioned earlier something about 200,000 new jobs. Well, we lost 3,000 jobs last report. And is that our goal, or is that the Department of Economics Development's goal, or should we be working together with them as per this board and that? I don't even know, there's 7. I know that Director
And Debbie Durham is coming. She had a conflict today.
But I know she comes to the board meetings, and I think that's something that if we could create 200,000 jobs, which is a great thing, but regardless of the political beliefs, we need to, that's a cross everybody needs to get together on.
Right.
So let's do this.
Right.
Increase family incomes, education, these are all good things, but I really wonder as to, I believe that phone call that led to this being on the agenda dealt with what type of authority or does this board actually have, things happening without the board. Certainly, I don't believe there was ever any board approval to close any shops and to lay anybody off. I know that you said that in a meeting at our office that it was presented at least 3 times. Well, I don't believe I ever missed a board meeting. I never heard it. I went back and looked through my minutes. So I'm curious as to what, I think Representative Jacoby, what authority do we have, or are we really just a sounding board? What authority do we have in the direction of this agency? And we say, no, we don't want that to happen. We say, yes, that's a good idea. Or maybe we need to look at that and get a little more input and figure it out. It's just back to what Francis said earlier today, and I think it was brought up by several other people. Look at these maps. Alan McGee, nobody. Clayton, we got one. You know, there's a lot of travel time here. I'm somewhat shocked Jasper doesn't have one. Benton doesn't have one. Iowa County doesn't have one. Rural Iowa is really, you know, and you say these are being added daily, and this is as of last week. So I got some concerns as to just exactly what this board's authority is.
I thought Joe was fairly clear that it's input and advice. It is not.
Well, apparently it doesn't listen to the advice, Ken, because I don't remember anybody ever voting or only that we close any of these things. And you and I are going to argue about this forever because I know that where you stand and you know where I stand, and I try to do it as respectfully as possible. But I'm really advise and then what? So am I just going to sit here and advise? Because honestly, I think I know a little bit more about state government and state employees than you do. Just a bit. Such as the fact that I don't interrupt you. Such as the fact that it was brought up today that we're going to maybe look at using volunteers. Well, you might want to look at a collective bargaining agreement that says you can't do that. So I'm going to be really tired of things happening that seem to step on things. And you know, there's lawsuits out here, there's grievances out here, and there's all this other stuff. So before we go jumping into bandwagons or jumping off the ship, let's look at the entire picture as to how does it tie in with these collective bargaining agreements? How does it tie in over here? And do we have an authority to say, no, you can't do that? Or do we have an authority to say you can't? Joe, I known Joe for years and respect him very much. I've seen his work. But at the same time, I hear advise, whatever. So what? I advise the veterans home on things all the time. That doesn't mean anything. Is it just, am I just sitting here for 4 hours or 6 hours today? And then what? Then what do we achieve? I want to know if we have authority, if we set policy. What do we do? Because apparently we don't have any authority. Apparently we don't set any policy. So what do we do here?
Well, I think we're trying to get back on the road. And I agree we have not set strong goals the last couple of years since I've been on the board, at least. I don't feel like I was involved in a whole lot of goal setting for at least the last 2 years, maybe 3 years. So I'm sort of energized with the idea of let's get this board moving and give them a purpose so that we do feel that we are spending our time usefully. And I think this is one way we could do it. The way to go about it, I think I want to ask you folks, do you want staff to bring us some ideas? Do you want to sit down and brainstorm for, say, half an hour, 45 minutes at the start of the next meeting? We could do that and put all of our ideas on the table. Then let's see what's workable. Maybe by then we'll have a better idea on our budget figures for 2013 that we can say, okay, we're going to do most of this without any new monies. So what can we do with what we have, whether it be an education piece out in the regions about apprenticeships, for instance. We don't have to spend a lot of dollars doing something like that. We can come up with ideas. We're a bunch of smart people here, so let's see what we can do.
I certainly want to offer up that our Bureau would be glad to send out customer service plans from all of the regions. And I think it's really important for this board to have those local inputs from all the different parts of the state. Is going to be very, very helpful. The only thing I would say is we'd kind of like to save a tree because they tend to be very thick. If we could send them electronically, that would be great. But I think it would give the board a very good overview of what each region is dealing with.
Well, in that regard, Barbara, I think what might be more valuable is for you folks who work on this every day to be able to give us a short summary so we don't have to read 50 pages each for 15 regions, and to give us maybe a summary that says these are the 3 or 4 or 5 areas that this region is really emphasizing in their plan. And then tell us about that in a page or less.
We can certainly do that. And I guess I would rather have the region write that because they're expressing their own needs.
Sure.
Well, we will be glad to put that together, and
we can ask each one of our web chairs
yes,
to put that together, and we can get that out. And then I think then the focus becomes, we've seen what all the local groups think is really important and a focus for them in their strategy or in their priorities for money for that session, regardless of where the money comes from, but their priorities are to be in this area or that area. And then we as a local board can roll that up into a state concept for policy and emphasis and priority. But then we can also give feedback to the local boards that says, just as an example, that says, we've seen all the great work that you've done, and you know, as a state board, additionally, we would like you to consider perhaps emphasizing apprenticeships or emphasizing an area of education, maybe it's a digital divide, or emphasizing whatever our priorities are after we've read their input. And so we can have this two-way conversation, really, that has a priority setting for the state board, and then that gets into the locals and back, and vice versa, because we're doing it in both directions.
I think I would also, I think that's excellent, and I think I would also like to see, I know you have a lot to do, but you do get to go to workforce conferences and you get to pay attention to what other states are doing. I often hear you say that this state's doing this or that. Maybe it would be helpful if we were going to plan a session that we would have, what do we think some of the maybe pilots that the Department of Labor is funding, or what are innovative ideas that states are doing that Iowa might want to look at? Not like I want to follow them, but maybe in some cases something that another state is doing might lead us to think about how Iowa could do it, or would lead us to think of how we could do it better than they could, especially in New Jersey.
Well, especially in North Carolina, which is fairly close to the following month right now. I really don't want to be connected with one of the worst employment and the worst OSHA violators in the United, as per states, and say, oh, you guys are doing such a good job, we want to do that. Well, I got a problem with it. Are they trying to come up to our standards, or are they going down to, are they trying to bring us down to theirs? I appreciate what gets said here. Actually, today I found it interesting that no, the federal dollars didn't really go up, but the other money coming down raises the percentage of the federal dollars. So it makes it, it's like a miracle. It looks like it's going up, but it really isn't. And it was explained really, to me, it was like, oh, federal dollars are going up when I saw the report. Then today it was like the light bulb came on. Wait a minute. No, they didn't. Just the percentage went up. So I appreciate what the staff brings to these meetings, and I think that if it's something that the board can agree on, I've been a fan of apprenticeships since, well, let me see, about 1972 when I signed up with the International Association of Machinists. So not only did I learn a trade, but it taught me math, which apparently a high school education couldn't teach me. But it was just, it's one of those things, maybe that's something we really need to look at. I was in Northeast Iowa this past week, and I saw signs up there, there's wind things everywhere. And they got signs on the bulletin boards up there in the grocery store saying, apply for this job. air technology, air electric technology technicians needed. 2 years experience or 2 years education.
Okay, and I
$28
think
an
this
hour.
goes with our
There's a
goal
catch
setting.
right there. Maybe we ought to be looking into how do we educate those people for
Yeah,
that thing.
and I think we can do this, and I appreciate all of you folks. We're a half an hour past gavel time.
Could I suggest one thing, please?
Yes,
I think this kind of conversation needs more time.
I do too.
And I think we should devote more time to this conversation and not at the end of the day when we have 28 minutes.
Over, I would say.
And I appreciate that,
Oh, it's
Joe.
all your fault we're late.
But, no, it's not. But
I hope you've got
it's the
strong
end of the day
shoulders.
and people are getting a little stressed out. so.
I understand that, and I do want to bring this back. Hopefully at the next board meeting, we'll make a space, and I think it would be wise to do it up front.
And
No.
I think what we can do, just to give you a heads up, what we can do in preparation for that, is we have a state plan. And so we won't need to send you these a day and a half before the board meeting. We'll gather them up, we'll do some summaries, and we'll get that information out to you so you can see where each of the state plans are, and then you can kind of think about that as we get towards the next board meeting.
If you prefer, I prefer to get mine electronic. Fine. Send that.
If everyone's happy with electronically, we can do that. Is everyone okay with that?
No, Chair.
We'll make one or two exceptions for that.
This techno peasant here
Yes, we can do it.
decides I have to write
Yeah,
notes
we
on
can do
it,
it.
so. Any other
Just,
pressing things?
we'll be sending out a time for Monday, 9:30, 10-ish. We'll see, check calendars and get that on your schedule for this coming Monday.
Next meeting is November 20.
30.
30. Okay, I shouldn't do anything from memory.
Yeah.
Okay, if there are no burning issues that we need to talk about, let's close the meeting.
Do you need a motion?
I'm just going to declare. We're adjourned.
Way to go, Dave.
Very nice.